Welcome. This is the 7th workshop in the 2023 New York State World Languages Professional Learning Series. My name is Candace Black, and I am your World Language Associate in the Office of Bilingual Education and World Languages of the New York State Education Department. Welcome to Getting Ready for Implementation of the World Language Standards Administrators' Perspectives. This session will share experiences and lessons learned from 2 districts' journey towards implementation of the revised NYSED World Language Standards. Learn about effective and practical strategies to lead and support world language educators as they incorporate the revised standards in their classroom. Familiarize yourself with the resource created by OBEWL to guide curriculum alignment and instructional shift. Our presenters today are William Anderson and Shauna Sweet. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to invite Will and Shauna to begin this workshop.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And Candy, thank you for leading off. I am Will Anderson. I'm the Curriculum Associate for World Languages in the Massapequa School District on Long Island.
And I'm Shauna Sweet. I am the Assistant Director of World Languages in the Greece Central School District, and we'll tell you a little bit more about our districts coming up.
As a reminder, these symbols help identify the role throughout the webinar. The mic is a gentle reminder to keep your mic on mute throughout the webinar as it is being recorded. The think bubble is time for you to think to yourself about what is on the slide or what we're discussing at that moment. We ask that you not use the chat feature during the webinar. When you do see this chat bubble, it indicates that you can write in the chat, and we will allow time at the end to answer some questions using the chat feature. And of course, the folder icon reminds you that what we are showing is available in the shared folder that will be linked in the chat feature. The goals for today: I can identify where my department is on the revised standards implementation continuum and determine next steps. I can identify strategies to lead and support world language educators as they implement the revised standards in their classrooms. And I can identify NYSED resources to guide curriculum alignment and instructional shifts.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to start with just chatting a little bit, thinking about where we are. So given our backgrounds in world language education, when doing this activity, Will and I both took a look at this image and thought we were maybe a 6, 7, or 8, especially thinking about where we've been along this journey. Then we started to climb higher up the tree as we explored the standards. And examining our practices and modifying our curriculum. So this is an activity that I did with my own department to try to have people determine where they fell on the blob tree. It really helped to boost confidence knowing that we are all in different places. Some of us are just starting down at the bottom. Some of us are, hanging off on a limb, but we're all eventually moving in the same direction. So as our warm up for this webinar, we want you to take a look at the blob tree. Think about where you are in your revised standards journey. So we're going to release a poll, and in the poll, please input the number that you feel represents your readiness to implement the revised standards. The poll is completely anonymous, and this just will be an activity for us to see where people are. So again, thought bubble, think about which number represents you. And possibly your department, and go ahead and pick the number on the poll. They're still rolling in. Give it about one last moment, and then I will probably end the poll. Okay. Let's give it a roll. So taking a look, I'm going to share the results, and it's very interesting to see. We actually don't have anyone at 19 or 20. Nobody's right up at the top, but looks like everyone is in a different place along the journey. So hopefully this will let you know that you're not alone, and at least one other person feels like they're around the same place as you. So again, just wanted to share this activity as one type of activity that might be able to help you and your staff begin your journey if you're just beginning or figuring out where you are. All right. All right, next slide, please. So this is also our time for a disclaimer. So Will and I were so happy to be able to speak at this webinar, but we also want to provide the disclaimer that we're all a work in progress. So none of us have everything all figured out, but just also wanted to take the time to point out that we're all on this journey together, but we're really happy to share some of the strategies and tools with you that we've used so far, with the hopes that you can also use them with your own teams. So I'm going to begin first, talking a little bit about my district, the Greece Central School District, and our journey to the revised standards. So Greece is a large suburb. We're a large suburban district bordering Rochester, New York to the west. We have over 10,000 students, and we have 5 secondary campuses, 18 campuses altogether. Our department has over 30 world language teachers, and we teach ASL, Italian, and Spanish, beginning in 7th grade, so in grades 7 through 12. So we're going to tap into some of the resources to share what we've used. And one of the key resources that I've used with my district are the 3-part administrators reference guides. And if you haven't seen them yet, the reference guides are broken into 3 different parts. They provide key information about the revised standards and related concepts, but also some practical ideas for supporting educators as they make their shift. So the first part of the guide takes a look at, planning for implementation. What are some things to think about early on? Part 2 is the standards in action. So what really do the standards look like? What's involved in them? And part 3 has some ideas of what this might look like in a classroom observation. So part 3, there's 2 part 3s depending on your school or district. So one of the part 3s is focused on the Danielson rubric, and the other part 3 is focused on the NYSED rubric, and they go ahead and share some ideas of some look-fors as you're engaging in classrooms. So for my district, I'm going to focus on 3 categories from Administrator's Reference Guide number 1, and I'll be focusing on providing awareness, providing time, and providing funding. So just to start, the very first step in the process as we are beginning this journey is to take a look at our curriculum. And so in Greece, in our district, we actually have a curriculum review process. So we are utilizing the process that's already in place in our district, and we're building on a foundation of what we already have in our district to move forward with planning for the revised standards. So we determined in our district that the research and recommendations phase is really where we are this year in terms of where we are in the process. So we've been focusing on identifying what current research shows as best practices and considering how that might inform what recommendations are put forth. So we've really spent this year engaging and being able to make recommendations about what we learn. So one key tool is also from the administrator's reference guide. It's just, it's the timeline for gradual implementation, and it's a reminder that it's really a place to take a look at where you are in the implementation process and try to backwards plan so you know exactly where you are and where we're going. So this was a key tool that I started just making sure that everyone in the district, from administrators, superintendent, school board, and teachers alike, all have a very good idea of, what the expectations are and what the timeline is. The next step was assembling a vertical team. So our curriculum and assessment vertical team is made up of members from all across the district. So our goal really is to take a deep dive into the revised standards and lead the district through the early stages of implementation and begin to align curriculum and assessment practices across grade levels. So we, put the call out there for teachers who want to participate. This vertical team has met in various capacities. So we've had 2 full release days, but also providing some additional time after school where people can continue working as a committee. And we've done some work asynchronously as well. But, as you can see, we have a variety of different stakeholders, languages, levels, and buildings as part of our vertical team. And we've been really doing the bulk of the work moving forward. So our very first step when we met as a vertical team was to establish some working agreements. So we talked a lot about what was really important to us as we start to begin this work. So these working agreements were developed collaboratively at our first meeting, and we try to reference them, or we've posted them back up at additional meetings in person, or even virtual. They can be referenced, and just referring back as necessary. So some things that we thought were very important to us, and again, these were developed by the group, was being open-minded, making sure that we're solutions oriented, always being grounded in the standards, and respecting past practices. So again, if a person was feeling like a little bit, maybe, I'm not really sure where you're going with that, we agreed to be future oriented. So we're moving in that direction. And it's really helped us to make sure that we were all on the same page in terms of what we expected with the group work. Another thing we did is we tried this protocol called is and is not, and we determined what we are and what we are not. So what's the purpose of in goals of our group? And this was really important to drive the work moving forward, because people weren't really sure, like, what is it that's expected of us? So we determined that, the first thing we need to do is really to learn all about the revised standards, taking charge for the district, figuring out what does this look like and what does this sound like in the classroom, making a game plan, planning assessments, and then beginning to align by level, but also align with current practices and resources. We talked about developing curriculum resources, a map and pacing guides, but this is what we are not going to do. So it was very important to people that we decided we're not throwing everything we have out. We're not, it's not a zero-sum game. We're not going ahead and just wiping the slate clean, but we really want to keep what people love, some of the projects, some of the resources, some of the units that people feel like they're really connected to and really aligned with the revised standards. So we decided we're not throwing everything out. We certainly don't want to create scripted lessons. And, I think we also have an expectation that we are not creating a perfect implementation for 2023. We are going to continue to be a work in progress, and everybody feels, I think, a little bit more positive knowing that, it's a continued group effort, and we have reasonable expectations for one another. So the next step after that was doing a self-assessment. So as a unit, we talked a little bit, and I think people met in groups to say, like, what is it that we know? Let's brainstorm. What do we know about the revised standards? And people had various degrees of professional learning that they were involved with. So we did a, like a kind of a KWL, what you know, what you want to know, but instead we did what we know. What do we think we know? What are some things that we might have heard, or there might be some assumptions? And then what do we want to know? What do we definitely feel like we have to learn to be able to move forward with this work? And so after the self-assessment, we determined that professional learning was the most important thing to focus on. So we came up with an idea to do a modified jigsaw. And we started off with doing just a surface level introduction initially at our first full day meeting, to come up with this idea to divide topics in the countdown document. So if you haven't seen the countdown document, I believe it's linked in the slide, but it's the countdown to the launch of the revised New York State Learning Standards. What I love about this document is that it gives people an idea. If you are just starting out, it chunks the different webinars from OBEWL and connects it with different resources all on one page. So it gives people a really tangible and a nice flow of where to begin if you're not sure where to start with the revised standards. So we used that document and took the different topics and divided them up, and people, over lunch and, in the afternoon, they had a little bit of time to individually dig into the webinars, dig into the resources, and then we came back and people presented to one another on what they learned. And this was a really good overview to provide on that first initial meeting. So people walked away with thinking like, I kind of know what this is all about. I kind of have an idea of where this is going. So you can just see two examples of the slides that some of our teachers designed. One was on Standard 1, and the other one was on Understanding Unit Planning, Checkpoint A. So just some exemplars there. And another thing that we focused on providing was time and funding to attend professional learning. So in the fall, we were fortunate that the NYSEFL annual conference was right here in Rochester. So we were able to send a representative group of teachers on both days for the NYSEFL conference. And we also were able to attend as a group the Rochester Regional Conference here in the spring at Nazareth College. And something that seemed to be really helpful was having this idea and ability to share out what we learned. So we created a Google slideshow with tips and resources. So every teacher who attended the conference was responsible for creating at least one slide to share out something exciting or something big that you learned. So if you can see here, Melissa shared, actually it was a video, I believe, from Melanie Thomas's session. So you can see that she was able to include a video, a picture, but people were able to share key learning ideas, photos, notes, resources, and links. And then afterward, we were able to share it with our entire department to say, look at all the things that we learned at these in-person conferences. So it was a really nice way for people to, have an accountability, but also be able to be excited about what they're learning and sharing with one another. And another opportunity that we really try to infuse is, the NYSED webinars. As you know, you're here at one today. The NYSED webinars are plentiful. But what I really wanted to do was make sure that teachers knew how to use the live and the recorded NYSED OBEWL webinars to count for their choice professional learning hours. So I connected with the professional learning office, and together together we created a slide presentation which walks teachers through the process for, okay, where do I find the webinars and how do I select one? And what do I do afterwards to earn professional learning credit? And then afterwards, we use the frontline system for professional learning. So how do you submit it to the district so the district can count your hours? And I think that's something that I've gotten some great feedback on. Some of these systems are tricky for people to navigate, and they found this part of it very helpful. So people have that ability to do this on their own time. And then finally, with our vertical team, we've been getting into the audit process. So that would be both a curriculum audit and a materials audit. So for the materials audit, I'll start with that. We've taken a look and did a survey, which was on a Google form, to see what materials are in your classrooms. We do have some textbooks that are currently in use by some teachers, some not. So what's in your classroom? What are you using? What are you not using? But most importantly, what do you think you need moving forward so we can start to preview some materials? So we've done the materials audit, and we've been taking a look at some specific like readers and really trying to think about how we're infusing authentic resources into our curriculum. And along with that comes the curriculum audit. So if you haven't seen, this is a NYSED resource, which is a curriculum audit template. So we took our curriculum maps, our district curriculum maps that were developed, locally, and we completed an audit using the NYSED curriculum. So mapping out units for each level. I believe this might be, I can't remember. It might be Spanish level 1, let's say. But we took a look at our current curriculum maps and tried to figure out where this fits in with the revised themes and topics. So our next steps really is to make sure that we have filled in all the gaps, that we're not missing anything that should be critical at that level, but also trying to make sure that we're infusing the modes and can-do statements for every lesson. And again, along with that is the materials audit, taking a look at, okay, what types of resources and authentic learning experiences can we provide to go along with these units? And then finally, thinking about assessment. So I think we all know about backwards planning and beginning with the end in mind. And what a lot of people tend to ask is, well, what is the test going to look like? So this year we are starting an assessment pilot. So, if you're not familiar with the APPLE, it's the ACTFL assessment for performance toward proficiency in languages. So we have begun to pilot the assessment so people can see, what an assessment looks like that measures performance toward proficiency. And we've started it with our level 1 and level 3 Spanish and Italian students, just asking teachers on our vertical team who want to volunteer. They've actually asked their students, do you want to volunteer to take this test on the computer? And I think it's been a really helpful process so people can begin to get a sense of how we're measuring towards proficiency, and what the test looks like, and more importantly, what kind of data it provides on where our students are. So that is another step where we are at right now. And then finally, so our next steps is continuing with the curriculum audit and vertical alignment to really try to make sure that we are fully prepared for our 7th graders next year, and that they are being engaged in all of the themes and topics and modes that they should be. We are going to continue to meet regularly, including summer work. We have some curriculum hours that are allotted in our district. And something that we've wanted to do, but has been slowed because of the pandemic and shortages of subs, is shadowing. So we really want to think about shadowing teachers, schools, and other districts. But most importantly, we do have some teachers in our own district that are really starting to implement these practices and do it really well. So we're trying to think creatively about how we might visit one another, or how we might be able to even use technology like video to be able to shadow different lessons. So that's the next steps on our journey, and we're hoping to have some of that available between now and the fall.
Great, thank you, Shauna, for sharing Greece Central School District's journey with the standards. I'd like to share about the Massapequa School District and our journey. Massapequa is a large suburban district on the south shore of Long Island. We have approximately 6,000 students. We have 3 secondary campuses, 6 elementary schools, 37 world language teachers. Our core world language program is grades 6 through 12 for French, German, Mandarin, and Spanish. We also have a grades 3 to 5 Spanish FLES program, or foreign language elementary school program. And we have a grades 9 to 12 ASL elective program in our district as well. Here are the methods to support the implementation of revised standards and what we've kind of focused on. Again, to reiterate what Shauna mentioned earlier, we're focused on advocacy for the standards. We want to promote the standards. We want to provide time to collaborate, audit, and revise our curriculum, and funding for curriculum development and the purchase of up-to-date resources that support the curriculum development. So for the past 15 years, we have focused on advocacy and education in the Massapequa School District. This includes creating awareness of standards-based world language learning. I've also collaborated closely with building administrators to support them in the observation and evaluation process of our world language teachers. I help them to understand what it looks like when they enter a world language classroom. What's great now is that NYSED provides even more support for administrators with the rollout of these 2 new documents that are observation guides for world language lessons and lesson plans. We've also presented to school boards meetings to propose our FLES program. That was back in 2016. And we give periodic department updates to the school board as well. And importantly, our teachers are compensated for curriculum development. And additionally, we've purchased up-to-date resources to support that curriculum development. Part of Massapequa's journey includes the updating of curriculum in 2017, when our middle school was reconfigured to grades 6 through 8. The district added 6th grade world language, 40 minutes on alternating days in 2017. So we created a new 6th grade curriculum that was designed based on the can-do statements that led with language functions, themes, high frequency words, and structures. The following year, we redesigned the decades-old curriculum to now focus on the can-do statements, again, that lead with language functions, themes, high frequency words, and structures. This redesign continued each subsequent year at each level. And we now plan to audit the 6th and 7th grade curricula based on the revised standards. We have relied heavily on the webinars provided by NYSED's Office of Bilingual Ed and World Languages to guide our journey. And while helping us to understand the revised standards, the webinars have also provided teachers with valuable CTLE credit. We've also advocated and supported teachers to attend various world language conferences, such as NYSEFL, LILT, and even ACTFL. And we continue to encourage the district to support teachers in having those opportunities for professional development. We've also advocated for additional funding from the district to support outside presenters to work with our team of world language teachers with specific topics related to the revised standards. Most importantly, I would say is scaffolding, thematic instruction, the can-do statements, and checkpoint A unit design. Our journey with planning and assessment has focused on the modes of communication. We moved away from focusing on students learning about the language and focusing on what students can do with the language. We have also focused on using authentic resources to engage our students. NYSED has curated a wealth of authentic resources for our teachers on the Wakelet site, which also references Leslie Grant's resources. So our next steps in Massapequa are to continue to audit our curriculum and our assessments. We will continue to engage in the NYSED Professional Learning Series, as well as other additional learning opportunities that the district will hopefully support. And we will continue to support newly hired world language teachers and building administrators with understanding the revised standards. So what are your next steps? We want you to each think about what we've just presented and think of these statements. A next step I will take towards standards implementation is, or maybe one resource or strategy I will use for this is. So we'll give you a few seconds to think about this. Is just for thinking, pondering where your next steps might be.
Okay, so again, we are hoping that after today, you have been able to identify where your department is on the revised standards implementation continuum and determine next steps. We're hoping that you can identify strategies to lead and support world language educators as they incorporate the revised standards in their classroom. And then also that you can identify some NYSED resources to guide curriculum alignment and instructional shifts. So now, we would love to have the opportunity for our attendees to share any questions in the chat, share any strategies that you have used, or share anything that you feel like that you learned or that you found really useful in the webinar. So thank you for listening, and how we invite you to engage in a chat discussion.
So thank you, Will and Shauna. We really appreciate you sharing your experiences. The initial question that was in the chat was about where to find the world language observation guides for lesson plans and lessons. And that's in the administrator reference guide, which is actually in the folder that Bill is linking right now in the chat. So we will take a look for other questions that may have been asked. Gitano has asked, what organization provides the outside additional professional development?
That's a good question. I'll speak to Massapequa. Massapequa has supported me finding consultants who are willing to work with us. So Massapequa has agreed to offer the funds for me to find consultants to come in and work with our teachers, which was a lot easier during COVID and may still be easier with the advent of Zoom. So you may not need someone to necessarily be in district, but there's no one organization that I've used to find consultants. I don't know if Shauna can speak to that.
Yeah, so in our district, we basically stuck with the NYSED resources as we're digging in this year. And, also taking a look at perhaps some professional literature that's out there and encouraging people to really access, access what's widely available. So we haven't done a lot of outside besides NYSEFELT, which, like I said, they were both in our own backyard. So we were fortunate this year.
I see a question that I was also wondering. Shauna, on your vertical team slide, on the list of folks who make up that vertical team, you have, it says teacher on special assignment for world language. We're wondering what that might mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share. Actually, our teacher on special assignment, Tracy, is here. But so in our district, like I said, we're a very large district, and we have several, we call them TOSAs, or teachers on special assignment, who support all of the buildings. And so for our department, because we are world languages, it's both world language, ENL, and bilingual. We have a TOSA who supports all of those areas. And we try to describe, what does that mean? But I like to think of it as like a teacher leader, somebody who kind of works across the district, mentors other teachers, provides professional learning, and really supports some of the central district operations that we need to get done here at central office. So she kind of does a little bit of everything, but we're very fortunate to have somebody dedicated to our department.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, if you know, I'm going to point out a question, or Joanne, do you want to give it?
So
Questions?
there's quite a few here. Well, somebody was asking, will this be posted? And the answer is yes, that the recording of the webinar and the link to the handouts folder will be on the State Ed professional learning webpage. A couple people have asked about our world language lesson and lesson plan observation guide and how they've been received. So if you don't mind, I'm going to speak to that, and then I would love for you to speak to that as administrators who may have already started using this or sharing this, which is that we just completed doing 2 webinars for administrators and introducing the observation guide and actually having the participants apply it. Again, these are workshops that are going to be posted to the NYSED OBEWL website that you can watch. And the administrators who participated in those webinars were very, very positive about the guides and about how they could potentially use them. So that's what I know so far. Will, Shauna, what about your perspectives on that?
So I can, I've not rolled those out specifically. We have, and as many districts probably do, we do have a negotiated tool that we use for the observation process. So we can't necessarily move away from that, but we want to figure out how to use this as a companion to that, to help administrators and also to help teachers see where those correlations are to Danielson in terms of the rubric. I know I'm talking about 2 different things, but we haven't rolled out the observation and lesson plan guides yet.
So I love that you made that point, because they are not intended to serve as the evaluation instrument, but to help administrators interpret those elements of world language teaching that are unique to our field. So they don't replace, and we understand that there's negotiated use of other instruments. So,
and I can share for that one. I haven't shared it. I may have shared it with administrators in like a newsletter or something, but I think it needs a little bit more time to digest. I have shared it with our vertical team because people want to know, what does this look like? And I think it's a very useful tool to make some of what we introduce a little bit more concrete. So far I think it's a really useful tool for teachers. But my plan then over the summer, we have a leadership week where we do presentations to leaders. And so when I have the opportunity to talk about world languages, I will certainly share those. And I think that administrators will be very relieved to have something that they can use as a tool. So that's my plan.
Thank you. So Lori asks, in your specific districts, did you work to revise the curriculum to the new World Language Standards year by year? For example, you have your 7th grade curriculum ready to go for fall. You're now working on 8th grade curriculum, or did you work on all of Checkpoint A at once?
So, so we started specifically with our 6th and 7th grade, and then the following year we modified our 8th grade. So I don't know if that really answers the question, because Checkpoint A is really all 3 of those grade levels. But we made sure that we were modifying each level that students were studying, just so that we could really monitor how that 7th grade curriculum was working throughout the year, so that we were more informed in our redesign or modification of our curriculum that summer for the 8th grade.
And for us, we're kind of, still building the plane while flying it. We are hoping to have our 7th grade, actually our Checkpoint A aligned, but then really focusing for the fall on 7th grade. So when we're talking about authentic resources and the can-do statements and everything that we're really hoping to implement, it will be just 7th grade, and then we'll roll up year by year. And I think there's some benefit to that, to be able to, if you will, almost pilot, see what really works, see what students are taking in and being open to, and then rolling it up year by year.
So there are a number of things that people have offered to share. One is an appreciation for the audit form, which will be a good source for inventorying resources. Another person has commented about becoming a seal of biliteracy school has been most helpful in understanding the 3 modes and the use of can-do statements. Beth suggests that NYSEFLT has some great webinars too, free if you're a member. And Celinda asked about presenters that you found were most impactful. So if you would like to comment on that.
Yeah. So I can say in terms of the seal of biliteracy, I think it's been a really great window for us into opening up, exactly what it looks like to focus on communication, and in particularly thinking about the assessment. So we've been using the Apple for our seal of biliteracy candidates for languages that aren't taught in school for a few years. So I think it was already kind of somewhat known, and it didn't just come out of the blue. So it was I guess a way to edge in to say, and this is the type of assessment that we could be considering across the board. So for me, it was a nice window into looking at proficiency-based assessments.
Will, is there anything you want to add to that?
I would certainly echo. I'm glad that Beth pointed out NYSEFLT's webinar series, because NYSEFLT is lucky and fortunate enough to find some really great presenters for their webinar series. So if you just go to their website to see who has presented, there are some consultants there possibly that you can reach out to. But also, look at the ACTFL website to see who some of those presenters are. Districts may not be able to afford that level of PD, but certainly those are areas to seek out if you're looking for specific consultants.
Thank you. Daniela has shared an app that she's learned about, chateoapp.com, a new web app resource which aims to foster the 3 modes of communication and the use of authentic resources. I'll have to look at that. Cynthia asks, in your curriculum, are all of the teachers teaching the same units, or are they creating their own units? She has a second question, but I'll hold on to that one.
Will, can you speak to that one?
So that's an interesting question. Well, what I'll say is that the previous redesign that we went through with our curriculum was not necessarily based on these revised standards because they hadn't come out yet. So there was some flexibility at that time. We really focused on what can students do with the language at the, in each level with the different modes. So there was some flexibility with the different languages. Within each language, the teachers are using common units, but that might change from French to German to Mandarin, to be honest with you. But we are looking to kind of streamline that moving forward as we look at our redesign, our second redesign cycle.
So a second question that Cynthia asked was, what is the depth of your documents?
Yeah, so I'd say for us, currently we have curriculum maps that break down, the themes of a unit and, target vocabulary and goals, and some resources. And again, as we're looking towards the revised units, it will be very similar in terms of, not giving, giving a lot of flexibility and opportunity for creativity while having the foundational, components set in place. So making sure that people have an understanding of, what the learning targets might be, right? And also, what are some resources that might be aligned. So I think that's the goal, is to make sure that there's still some flexibility for teachers to be able to use, and especially thinking of how, language learners are all in different places. So I think, making sure that there are some options to be able to differentiate for different groups. They may have certain classes with a lot of native speakers. So, how might that look different? So definitely having some opportunities for differentiation, creativity, and flexibility, but having everybody following the same core is the goal.
Thank you for that. So what are your what strategies do you use to get staff buy-in or support from your administrators? And how do you communicate the urgency to understand the new standards?
That's a good question.
That's a really good.
Shauna, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. I want to make sure. I was going to try. So strategies for staff buy-in. I mean, I think definitely it's been a journey to, because some of our staff members, are maybe hesitant or, might not be confident in everything that they might feel is coming fast and furious. So I think something that's really worked for me is, again, trying to, as Stephen Krashen would say, reducing the effective filter, but really trying to make sure that we approach it from, I guess, an assets-based lens, that, everybody has the skills that they need to be able to do this. But what we're doing is improving our professional learning, so our practices might look a little bit different. And so in terms of getting buy-in, I really tried to focus on the willing participants, and really making sure that people who are very eager to help lead this work are the ones that, I'm really trying to cultivate that voice. And in terms of administrators, I can say, I've been focusing on the big picture of what does this look like. So I know that Will had mentioned, the idea of teaching students to use language instead of teaching about language. I think that's something very concrete that especially administrators who aren't from a world language background, you know, that's something that they can understand, and you don't need a degree in languages to know that. So really trying to break it down in as simple terms, and talking about, you know, we want to see authentic resources from the countries instead of, you know, textbooks that everybody's opening up to the same page. So really making it as concrete as possible. Is there another question?
So Linda has just reminded people in the most recent NYSEFLT journal, Elsie Deuce had an article called Moving the World Language Department Toward Proficiency, that if you're a NYSEFLT member, you would actually, I think the journal is mostly free and online, right on the NYSEFLT webpage, you might find useful.
Yeah.
We also have a comment. I think it really starts with attending PD, being aware of the common approaches to world language learning. Then the message is communicated to our administrators in hope of keeping an open mindset, showing willingness to adjust what appears to be the common ground. I love all these ideas people are sharing.
Yeah. And one thing that we actually discussed at our recent professional learning day, which was just last week, is the idea or the similarities, because our department is ENL, English as a New Language, and World Languages, and we tend to think of them as very separate. But if you've stepped into an English as a New Language class, you see that everybody's using the target language, and the teachers are using strategies to try to make the everything comprehensible and providing opportunities for students. They're using authentic resources, and they're also having scaffolded opportunities for output. And so one thing that we try to do is encourage some of our world language teachers visit a class with newcomers and see exactly how the teachers are communicating, because you may be able to pick up on some strategies that you can use in your world language classroom. And I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised. A lot of people really loved that idea after an opportunity to talk to, you know, someone who's an English as a New Language teacher. So that was kind of neat, and something else, thinking outside of the box that we're hoping to explore.
And you're getting a vote of confidence for that suggestion. Those are all the questions that have been put in the chat at this point in time. And Bill has just again put the link to the folder. You'll find the slides from today's session in that folder as soon as we're done today. And there are hyperlinks in there that you can potentially follow.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop the recording now.